The yard empties at 4:15 and you watch it from the second tier, through the 4-inch strip of reinforced plastic the facility calls a window. You've done this 7 years into a 14-year stretch for 3 counts of armed robbery, and at some point you stopped watching the yard for the view and started watching it to read who goes where. That's where it lives, the hierarchy. Not in the fights, not in the commissary line, and where a man walks when he has 12 minutes of open time and chooses who to walk toward. 7 years gives you the eye for it. You don't think of it as a skill. It just happened. At the bottom, and there is always a bottom, are the men whose paperwork doesn't hold. Paperwork means your court documents. Every man in here eventually gets looked at, and if your documents show what certain documents sometimes show, things done to women, things done to children, the block knows inside a week. Harwick moves fast. A yellow card goes on your cell door from the disciplinary office, but the real flag isn't from staff. It's from the population. Men stop acknowledging you. They turn their backs in the chow line. They talk in front of you like you aren't there, and the silence isn't accidental. It's deliberate. Staff ends up moving those men off the tier eventually, not because the staff necessarily cares, but because the alternative creates paperwork of a different kind. The men who leave the block this way don't come back to general population. Not at Harwick. They go somewhere quieter. You've seen it happen twice. Both times, the cell got cleaned out on a Tuesday when the floors smelled like industrial cleaner, and nobody said anything about it afterward. One step up from the bottom is the new fish. You were one. Everyone was one. The new fish isn't disrespected the way the paperwork case is, but he's watched. He doesn't know the movement windows, the 15-minute intervals when men can cross between areas, and he'll miss them for the first 2 weeks and end up stuck against a wall while everyone else flows around him. He doesn't know which table in the cafeteria belongs to which group, and the first time he sits in the wrong seat, he'll find out by the way the table goes quiet and stays quiet. Nobody hits him. Not usually. They just wait. The new fish either figures it out fast or he doesn't, and the ones who don't figure it out end up attached to whoever showed them the first lesson. That attachment has a cost that takes months to fully understand. You owed a man named Porter 6 commissary items in your first 3 weeks. You thought of it as a loan. Porter thought of it as something else. It took you 4 months and considerable effort to get square with him, and by the time you did, you'd learned the 3rd tier of this system from the inside. The debtor is not the new fish. The debtor knows how things work. He just can't get ahead of it. He owes commissary, owes protection, owes favors that compound the same way interest compounds, and every time he gets close to 0, the number moves. You see them on every block. You can tell by the way they move, always slightly too fast, always checking behind them without looking like they're checking. The debtor isn't in danger the way someone might think. Open violence at Harwick is relatively rare because the standing count happens 5 times a day and staff is paying attention. The real pressure on a debtor is slower than violence. It's the knowledge that his cell is not his time is not his. His commissary, when he gets it, will be walked out of his hands before he gets back to his door. The middle of the hierarchy is where most men live and where you live. It doesn't have a name the way the extremes do. You're not a plug, not a shot caller, not a debtor. You've got a small circle of 3 men you'd trust in a narrow situation. You pay what you owe on time, you don't borrow, and you stay out of other people's arrangements. After 7 years, your cell has a bent metal locker with your own padlock, a stack of books from the library, and a reputation for not causing problems and not accepting them either. That's enough. Not impressive, not precarious. Enough. Most men, if they make it past year 2 without going into debt or getting ticketed for something serious, end up here. The middle isn't comfortable exactly, but it's stable, and stability in here is its own kind of currency. 1 tier up from the middle sits the plug. The plug controls something people want. At Harwick, it's cell phones, tobacco, medication that got redirected somewhere before it reached its intended destination. The plug has weight because weight is just leverage, and leverage is just having something someone needs. The position looks good from the outside. Men come to the plug. Men are respectful to the plug. Men owe the plug. What the view from outside misses is that staff is always looking for the plug, and rivals are always looking for the plug, and the plug lives in a narrower space than you do. He carries more and spends more energy protecting what he carries. You've seen two plugs at Harwick get moved to SEG within a week of each other. One came back, one didn't. The one who came back was quieter after. He stepped down, said nothing about it, just stopped being who he was. You understood that completely. Above the plug is the shot caller. The shot caller speaks for a group. That group might be organized around a gang affiliation, around a shared background, around years of mutual obligation. The shot caller doesn't necessarily have the most physical presence or the most contraband. What he has is the ear of his group and the ability to represent it in conversations with other groups. He negotiates the disputes before they become incidents. He decides how his people respond when someone from outside steps into something that affects them. Staff knows who the shot callers are at Harwick. They don't officially acknowledge it, but when something needs communicating to the population, the word travels faster through certain men than through any announcement. The shot caller position looks like power, and it is power, but it's also accountability. When something goes wrong with his group, the first man staff looks at is him. He carries the blame upward and the orders downward, and that position has its own kind of pressure that never fully eases. At the top, and there are maybe two men at Harwick right now who occupy this position, sits someone whose name you know but whose eyes you've made a point of not holding too long. These are men who have been inside long enough, done enough, and survived enough that the usual calculations simply don't apply to them. The debtor system doesn't reach them. The plug needs them but can't control them. Even the shot callers defer, not always openly, but in the small choices that reveal what a man actually thinks. These are men with 20-plus years inside, with histories on the block that have been told and retold until they've taken on the quality of something fixed. One of them at Harwick sits alone at a table in the cafeteria, and no one sits next to him. Not because he's excluded, because everyone understands without being told that the space around him is his. Staff doesn't cross him directly. They route around. You've seen it. He gets his standing count acknowledged the same as anyone else, but the officer doing it walks a little faster past his cell. You've always found that informative. You stand at your door for the 4:30 count. The officer walks the tier. You're 7 years in, no debts, no yellow card on your door, a padlock you own, and a circle of 3 men you'd stand with in a narrow situation. Not the bottom, not the top, not the plug with his phone tucked into his mattress, not the man whose name clears a table in the cafeteria. The strip of reinforced plastic above your bunk lets in enough afternoon light that you can read without turning on the overhead. The radiator clicks twice an hour. The count finishes. The officer moves to the next cell. You fit in the middle. You decided a while ago that's exactly where you want to be.